Good day, Africa, and welcome to AAU Talks. AAU Talks is brought to you by the Association of African Universities headquarters here in Accra, Ghana. And don't forget that you can join the conversation via our social media platforms, Association of African Universities on Facebook and AAU_67 on Twitter. And today on AAU Talks, we have a very interesting topic where we are going to look at the creative industry in Africa. You know, Africa, throughout all the 54 countries, we have rich culture, we have great traditions and values, but most of it than not, we tend to struggle with the creative art industry. So we want to look at the creative art industry vis-a-vis higher education. What is the economic benefit? And so this is going to be an interesting show. I will go for a short break, and when I return, I will let you know my guest, and then the show continues. Stay tuned.
You may not have heard about us, but we have heard about you. You've been searching for a new kind of university that matches your ambition. Our world-class education is renowned, but there is more to us. Meet the university in Ghana that is transforming Africa. One that is nurturing a new generation of ethical, entrepreneurial leaders. One that offers scholarships thanks to the Massacre Foundation, so that you can be part of our community of students who stand for integrity, discipline, and excellence. There is only one such university, only one, where 100% of graduates receive job offers or graduate school admissions. You may not have heard about us, but we have heard about you. You are Africa's future, and we are Ashesi University College. Together, we can begin to create a new Africa.
Welcome back from the break. If you just joined us, you are watching AAU Talks, and our topic for discussion today is the economic benefit of the creative arts industry to higher education in Africa and globally as well. And we are privileged to have Professor Peter Lucas Senkbeil, and he is the Provost and Executive Vice President, Concordia University, Ivan, California in the United States, and he is my guest today, and we are going to look at the topic that has been given to us. Prof, you are welcome to Ghana.
Thank you, Kwesi. I'm very pleased to be here.
Great. And we are also much more privileged to have you in our studios this morning to discuss one of the very important subjects to us, even in the higher education space, and that is we understanding the economic benefit of the creative art industry to our African continent. And in as much as I know it's your first time in Africa, I know you may have read a lot about the continent, and so you would agree with me that the African continent has a lot of rich cultural values, heritage and traditions.
Yes.
And so just recently we were able to come up with a very wonderful movie. I don't know whether you watched it, The Black Panther.
Yes.
Where we were able to bridge the gap in terms of technology. We saw the value in technology, added it to our rich cultural heritage and our stories, our folklores, and it made a lot of waves globally. And so we know the values and the importance of the creative arts industry. Right. But before we even go straight into the subject, you have been a professor of theater for 26 years.
That's right.
And you are the provost and at the same time the executive vice president of your university. Could you share with us something about your university and then also your 26 years as a professor in that field?
Certainly. Thank you, Kwesi. Concordia University, Irvine is a faith-based institution. We're a liberal arts university located in Irvine, California, which is about 60 kilometers south of Los Angeles in Southern California. We are one of 9 Concordia University system campuses spread across the United States from the West Coast to the East Coast. And we have at our institution over 4,000 students, about 1,500 traditional undergraduate students studying one of 30 different undergraduate majors. Our largest major is actually business administration, but we also have majors in all of the various arts and sciences, including art, music, and theater, as well as graphic design. On the graduate side, we have 2,700 students who are taking courses in everything ranging from education to our MBA program to a master's in international studies. and we offer a doctorate in educational leadership. So we offer a broad array of academic programs and courses. We offer some things that are very focused on professional fields, such as athletic training, nursing, and business, but we also offer degrees in history and literature and the performing arts, and so we do a little bit of everything.
Okay.
Our mission is to develop wise, honorable, cultivated citizens of the world.
That's very interesting. Then we can move straight into a subject which is very important to me.
Certainly.
And I know it's very important to you as well, because you were a professor in the field.
Yes.
For 26 years.
Yes.
But let us go deeper into your upbringing. At what point in your life did you decide that you want to go into, or you want to one day specialize in theater studies or art?
The specific decision to become a professor in theater came quite late, I think, in my life. But I was always involved in the performing arts through childhood, and so I came to that decision after a long time being involved in the performing arts. I come from a Christian church tradition where we sang ever since I can remember, and I've sung in school choirs and church choirs from first grade on.
Okay.
I was involved in theater in the form of school plays, short sketches and skits, probably from 5th grade on. In high school, I auditioned for plays and was cast in major roles, and so I found that I was good at it and that I enjoyed it. When I got to the university, I continued to be involved in the arts as a co-curricular activity. I was actually studying theology. I thought at some point I might want to be a pastor.
Oh, okay.
But my university, in fact, the people in charge of the pre-seminary program said, get a broad-based liberal arts education. You'll have plenty of time to study theology later at seminary. Study something else. And the areas that had always appealed to me were English and history and theater.
Okay.
And so I chose theater as a major. And so I took academic coursework in theater and communication, and then also continued to be involved in plays as an actor, as a designer, as a director. And by the end of my university experience in my final year, I decided that I was going to try to do something in the performing arts before going to seminary.
Okay.
And so I decided to apply for graduate school in theater. I was accepted to Northwestern University, which is a large university in the Midwest in the United States, has a very good reputation as a good theater school. And by being in that program, by being a graduate teaching assistant, I found that I really loved theater. I loved directing plays. As much as I enjoyed acting, I think I enjoyed directing more because of the opportunity to shape the vision of the whole play, of the whole production. And I really enjoyed teaching, explaining things about the theater arts to students. And I derive great satisfaction from seeing their eyes light up as they understood what are sometimes very complicated concepts.
Okay.
And so it really was in graduate school that I finally decided this was the direction I was going to take.
To be a professor in the field.
Yes, that's right.
So to you, I presume it wasn't too much of a difficulty breaking the news to your parent that you want to go into theater art, you want to kind of specialize in the field?
Well, it wasn't entirely easy. My parents had certainly seen me sing and act for many years, but in my last year at the university, when I told my parents that I was going to go to graduate school for theater, my father's first response was, "What would you want to do that for?" And I don't think he was angry with me so much as he was bewildered. He hadn't really thought about the performing arts as a profession, as something that a member of his family might be involved in. But he was a very patient and understanding man. He still is. And he and my mother encouraged me to try this, and I pursued it, and it's worked out pretty well for me.
Okay.
I've been at Concordia University, as you say, for 26 years. I've directed more than 30 plays at the university. I ran the theater department for 14 years there. And then I moved into academic administration, first as a department chair, and then later as associate provost, and now as provost, I'm the chief academic officer of the university.
Okay.
I'm responsible for all of the academic programs of the university, and I am part of the executive council, which is the president's leadership team.
Congratulations.
For the whole institutions. Thank you.
Great. Yes, you know, I was asking you these questions because in that part of the continent, in Africa, for example, if you happen to be the first child and then you are a male and you break the news to your parents that you know, before even you start going to school, our parents have some kind of professions for us. Your father would want you to be a medical doctor, your mother wants you to be a pilot, and you know them already. So at some point, if you go to your dad and you tell him, "Daddy, I want to be a singer, I want to be a professional dancer," that if you're not careful, the feedback that you receive from that message would will squash your dream entirely. That is how we find ourselves in treating the creative art industry in Africa. Generally in America, in the United States, is that the same, or children are given the opportunity to unearth their talent and grow into their dream professions and careers without any intimidation or fear?
Well, I think it varies by family and by subculture within the United States. I think it's a little bit easier than what you're describing here for students in the United States, but it's still a challenge. There are still families where they're not as interested in that or receptive to that idea. But I think it's a little bit easier for young people to talk to their parents about pursuing something in the performing arts. I think there's a little bit more awareness of the benefits of a broad-based education that includes the performing arts, but also all of the liberal arts. That there's some awareness that it's these soft skills that one learns in the arts and in the liberal arts that are just as effective in preparing people for a life of work as specific professional or technical skills. You know, it's probably worth noting here at this point that in the United States in 2015, more than 4% of our gross domestic product came from the arts and culture industry. And that doesn't include
without a film?
That doesn't include Hollywood.
Okay.
That's just arts and culture. That's symphony orchestras and performing arts facilities, theater companies and art galleries and other cultural forms of expression. And so that's more than agriculture. That's more than transportation.
Absolutely.
So there's a significant element of our society, of our economy, that really derives from the performing arts. And then, of course, as you add television and film to that, now it becomes even larger. And of course, it has worldwide impact. You've just mentioned Black Panther as a movie, right? That again that fits into the Marvel Comics universe. You know, a decade-long series of films that have been produced, but also that expresses some important things about African cultures, and that does a really inventive job, again, I think, of fusing the sort of fantasy that comes from the comic book world with things about technology and cultural heritage and pride. And so it's an incredibly, I think, positive example of how the performing arts can contribute economically. It's one of the best grossing films in the world. I think it's in the top 20 still and probably will be for a long time. And it's also something that people can point to with pride. And so I think those sorts of examples maybe show us a way forward.
Okay. Then the next thing that we must know very importantly is the fact that we want to understand who is a creative person.
Yes.
And when we're talking about the creative art industry, what are the components of that industry? Because some of us seem not to get it in perspective, what can be classified as a creative ability in Africa and I think globally as well.
Certainly. I think the important point to begin with here is I believe that all people are creative. I believe it's hardwired into the human spirit, into the human condition. We all have a desire to express ourselves in some way. I have two sons who are today at university, but when my oldest was 18 months old, we had gotten him out of the bathtub and he had a towel draped around his shoulders, and he crouched down on the bathroom floor and put the towel over his shoulders and he said, "I being turtle."
I see.
And so he has this, you know, impulse to play act, to impersonate someone or something else. And I think that's a natural and a universal human tendency. Well, we all have that impulse within us, I think. And what happens over time in our education is we sort of lose that. We lose that desire, or perhaps we get cues from our families or even our educational system that these artistic impulses are really not very important or not very valuable. There's a famous designer in the United States who has made a habit of going into elementary classrooms and asking the students in the classroom, how many of you are artists? And he says when he goes into a kindergarten classroom or a first grade classroom and he asks that question, every hand goes up. And when he goes into a third grade classroom and he asks that question, about half the hands go up. And by the time he's in a sixth grade classroom and he asks, how many of you are artists? Almost no hands go up. Because the children have learned in some way that if you're going to be an artist, you're going to be thought of as an oddball, an outsider, that this is not what is most highly prized. So in the United States,
specific few people.
Yeah, it's the province of a few talented people. I think we internalize that idea early in many cultures, that, you know, there are these few gifted and talented artists and everybody else It's not really part of their life. And what I want to suggest is we all have this innate, inherent artistic desire. It's going to find expression in different ways, and we're all going to have different talent levels. I think the same is true in athletics, for example. I am not a natural athlete, but in the last 10 years, I've learned to be a long-distance runner, and I run half marathons now. Not very fast, but I've learned to derive satisfaction from training my body and pushing it beyond what its previous limits were. Now, that doesn't mean I can be a world-class athlete, and I wouldn't try to be, but I can still enjoy participating in a sport. And I think the same is true in the arts. Even if you decide not to go into art or music or theater or dance, or film or television as a performer, you can still find satisfaction in being engaged in those fields. The other thing that's important to note is that in all of these fields, we tend to think only in the narrowest terms about who is an artist. We tend to think about the actor, or we tend to think about the singer or the instrumentalist, and we don't think about all the other people who are involved. We don't think about the director, the producer, the designers, the technicians, the administrative personnel and support staff who work with the artists and around the artists to help those artistic activities come to life. And so
will you agree with me that you even need to be creative to be a medical doctor? You need to be creative to be an astute accountant. You need to be creative to be a pilot.
Absolutely.
Everything that, every profession that you find yourself in, you must have that ability to create and be creative.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. I think the natural human impulse to creativity finds expression in all sorts of ways. Sometimes for some people it's in the arts. For others it's in science and technology. I think to be an effective engineer you must be a creative person.
Absolutely.
Not just sort of solving the narrow problem that's in front of you, but thinking outside the box. In fact, there's an initiative in the United States right now funded by the Kern Family Foundation that is about entrepreneurial engineering. And what they're trying to do is cultivate an approach to engineering that encourages engineering students to think outside the box and encourages colleges and universities that offer engineering to educate students in creative ways, to help them to think about how do I expand the possibilities of this question as opposed to thinking about a narrow technical solution? What is this little problem a symptom of? What is the larger issue here? How does creative thinking then help me to do that? And again, I think in the applied fields, it's important. Creativity is critical. If we don't have creativity in medicine, we don't have innovation. We don't have new drugs and new medical technologies. It takes doctors and scientists and pharmacists and technicians who can think, what if we do this way, as opposed to the way we've always done it? And so that involves creativity. And so again, human creativity finds expression in all the fields and all these different disciplines. And I think it's important to make a space for that in the arts, but it's important to make a space for it in all of higher learning as well. So
there is a growing concern, and then there are two schools of thought who believe that creativity is innate. Others also believe that you can nurture someone to be creative. Because, for example, I can do a lot of things, but I cannot dance. I cannot put myself together to dance to the rhythm of a music. And so whether I'm in church, wherever I find myself, people force me to, but I can't. And I keep telling them that no matter how hard I try, I think I will just go off way. Where do you belong in that school of thought? Do you believe that creativity is nature, or it's innate, or you can nurture someone to be creative?
I think it's both. And by the way, I can't dance either. Not very well. I get up, I embarrass myself a little bit, but I find some joy in it sometimes. And I think, so first of all, I think it's important for people to find the creative outlets that they respond to, that give them joy and satisfaction, and to cultivate those areas. I think it's a little bit of both. I think some people have more natural artistic talent than others, or they acquire those talents and abilities in childhood very early. It's not always easy to see what the influences there are. Often it's opportunity. Parents giving them the opportunity and the freedom and permission to explore artistic activities and creative outlets. And so I think that's a lot of it. But I think nurture also has a lot to do with it, in the same way as it does in athletics. I think of the famous American basketball player Michael Jordan, who was a great natural talent. But as his career went on, and he became an older man, he was less skillful in certain ways, that he couldn't rely solely on his natural talent. And so he had to learn a different style of basketball. Not so much give me the ball, let me drive the basket and score 40 points a game, but let me learn how to be part of a coordinated offensive team where we're working together. And so he had to practice other kinds of skills, and it made him a better basketball player. You know, he won 3 of his NBA championships as a young man, and 3 of them as a somewhat older man. And I think the difference is he had to rely more on nurture and training later on. And so I think anybody can nurture those skills to a certain extent. Some of us are never going to be experts in those areas. I'm never going to be a great dancer. I don't really want to try. But I find great satisfaction in being a director and an actor and a singer. And again, while I may not be able to do all of those things at the professional level, I know that through training and education, I can improve those skills. And so I think there should be a space in higher education for the creative and performing arts, precisely to give those students who have that natural ability and that desire and that persistence the opportunity to cultivate those skills, because some of them are going to be able to go on and be successful. They are going to be able to earn a living. And in many cases, they're also going to be able to translate the skills they learn in the creative arts into other kinds of work, into other kinds of jobs. Even if they don't end up being an actor or director or a dancer or a singer or an instrumentalist, they can still take those skills and translate them into something else.
So in African higher education, and even for Ghana, for example, you would find just less than 1% of students who find themselves in such faculties of theater, arts, communication, mass drama. Just 1%, let me just be generous and say 1% of them have that desire, and they have that kind of flair to go into such areas. You will often find a lot of them being pushed there because they couldn't make it for maybe the higher, let me put it that way, maybe the person wanted to go to the university to study economics or study mathematics, and he couldn't make the grade, and so he was pushed into the theater art. Do you find that situation in your university or in most of the American universities, or the system is such that people have that kind of confidence to say that this is what I want to do, and I go straight into it?
I think it varies. I think about my own university. Every year we have a lot of first-year students who come to us and say, I want to major in biology because I want to be in the pre-med program, I want to be a doctor someday. And what happens is, and even though they've made the grades in high school, they get through the first year of general biology and their grades aren't so good. And they discover that, and these were the easy biology courses, and now they begin to realize, maybe this is not for me. This is not my field. And so maybe there are other fields that I should pursue. And so they pursue a variety of different options. I think one of the strengths, if I may be so bold, of the American higher education system is that it allows for that kind of flexibility at most universities. It's not very difficult to change majors at most schools. Students have a lot of latitude in choosing their major or program. Some majors have certain thresholds that you have to meet, certain grades that you have to make in certain entry-level courses to go on, certainly. But there's still a lot of flexibility, and students can change that even after they start at a college or university. And I think there's great benefit to that. And so there is certainly some of what you're describing in the United States as well. And then there are students who come to college knowing, I want to be a musician, I want to be a theater person, I want to be an artist, and they go straight into that field. And again, not all of them succeed equally well. Or they start in one area, I want to be an actor, and they discover that acting, while they enjoy it, is maybe not where their strongest gifts lie, but it's another area. I think of one of my colleagues from my time at Northwestern who struggled as an actor but was a very gifted costume designer, and today that's how he makes his living, designing costumes and designing fashion. And so he's taken his creative gifts and cultivated a particular aspect of them, and he has a very successful career today. We'll
go for a short break, but before we do, I want us to understand the benefit or relevance of creativity to the individual. If I am creative as a person, what are the benefits to me, before we even look at the benefit to higher education and then to the economy as well?
Certainly. I think studying the creative arts provides great benefits for personal development. I think for example, when I study theater, I have to learn how to read and understand a text carefully. I have to analyze that play at a very minute level, because if I'm playing a character, I have to make sense out of every line of dialogue. I can't just approximately understand the play. I have to understand it precisely so that I can bring interpretive qualities to this, and I can make a compelling and interesting performance for the audience. And so critical thinking and textual analysis are something that I learned. I have to work collaboratively, right? Most theater involves a group of actors and a director and a producer, designers and technicians, and we have to work together as a team. As the director, I have to discern the gifts and talents and skills of those creative artists and support people. I have to lay out a vision for what our particular production of this play is going to be like, and I have to work with them. I have to take the creative gifts of others and bring them together into this artistic product. And sometimes I have to sit back and take my own ego out of the equation and acknowledge that one of those people has a better idea than I do.
Sure.
And so I learn to collaborate. I learn to work together on a complex project with many parts. I learn to meet an absolute deadline, because when the play opens at 7:30 on Friday night, I can't go out in front of the audience and say, I'm sorry, we're not ready, please come back tomorrow.
So that means you must be intelligent or a genius to do what you do.
Well, again, I think you can learn many of the skills, and I think I took the natural and creative gifts that I was born with and that I developed early in my life, and then continued to practice them, to study them, to craft and hone them. And I think that's what all good artists do. One of the great things that the arts teach is discipline, self-discipline, right? If you're going to be a musician, you have to spend hours every day. Even concert pianists today, still, most of them practice between 2 and 6 hours daily. And these are people who are performing at the very highest levels in concert music. And yet, if they're not spending daily practice, their skills decline quickly. And so the amount of self-discipline that it takes to work at a very high level teaches us important things. And so those sorts of skills, I think, are part of what we learn in the performing arts.
Okay. Viewers, you are still watching AAU Talks here in Accra, Ghana, and we are still looking at the relevance of the creative art industry to higher education, and we have been hosting Professor Senkbeil. Stay tuned. We'll go for just a short break. We'll be back.
International University, you are the torch that lights above. In you we see a future bright, and by you the nation gaineth from services pure. The emblem that you chose is the message, unique in great and truly the giants. We search the height of success is true, but with such a science not task is surmountable. Equipped with knowledge, young to us, we go out of your gates with dignity. May your vision bright and knowledge so above.
Welcome back, and you are still watching AAU Talks here on AAU TV. And don't forget that you can join the conversation via our social media platforms, Association of African Universities on Facebook and AAU_67 on Twitter. And we have been discussing the relevance of the creative art industry to higher education. And we are hosting Professor Senkbeil from Concordia University, IVAL, in the United States. Prof, before we left for the break, we were looking at the relevance or the benefit of the creative art industry to the person. But now we want to look at the benefit of the creative art industry to the economy, and then also even to higher education.
Certainly.
In general.
Certainly. There's a lot of talk today in higher education about STEM.
Sure.
Science, technology, engineering, mathematics.
Absolutely.
I know from some of the study I've done of universities in Ghana and other parts of Africa that this is a major point of emphasis today, that many colleges and universities have programs that focus in one or more of those areas.
Sure.
And it's certainly a point of emphasis in the United States as well. As we are in an information economy, it's important for people to be able to manipulate information, to analyze, to understand, to conduct experiments, and to understand things about the physical world, and explore those concepts and apply them. But a growing emphasis in the United States today is STEAM, adding arts to science, technology, engineering,
that I believe is the way to go. Sure.
Because I think what it does is provide that opportunity for that creative element. It gives an opportunity to introduce that into education and training in the sciences. And I think the arts and the sciences really are complementary. They're different ways of knowing. They are different ways of looking at a problem. In the sciences, students are often taught to sort of take themselves out of the equation, to look at something very dispassionately, to say, well, I'm going to analyze this. I'm going to use a specific set of technological tools or a specific set of theories and concepts to understand this problem and arrive at a solution. And often that can be very productive. But it can also blind us to certain things. We can miss important things by not putting ourselves into the equation. What the arts do, of course, is put the human being into the situation. If I'm an actor, my body, my voice, my soul, my intellect are my instrument. As I'm acting on stage, right, my whole self is engaged in that performance. And so I have to understand what the performance is about, what we're really trying to accomplish, and bring my gifts in concert with other people's gifts into that performance. And I think there's some value to that in the sciences as well. Sometimes we tend to behave as though these are completely objective fields and that there's no human decision involved or human values involved. And yet, of course, there is. Here's an example. This is something that happened in the United States more than 10 years ago. In a city, 2 different postal workers went to 2 different doctors at 2 different hospitals. They weren't feeling well. They had symptoms that looked like maybe a cold or influenza. One of the doctors conducted some tests. The tests were inconclusive. The patient sort of said, well, it doesn't feel right. The doctor said, it's fine. The patient said I might have been exposed to anthrax because of something that happened at my post office. The doctor ran tests. Everything came back negative. He sort of disregarded the patient's information, gave him a basic antibiotic, sent the patient home. A week later, the patient was dead. At the second hospital, the doctor interviewed the patient, and the patient said much the same thing. I might have been exposed to anthrax. Something just doesn't feel right. The doctor ran the same tests or similar tests. They were similarly inconclusive. But her instinct was to continue to sort of talk with the patient, to elicit the patient's own self-observations, and thought, there's maybe just something here. And so she prescribed Cipro, which is an anti-anthrax medication, and hospitalized the patient, and the patient survived. And the difference is not the tests that were run or the quality of the American healthcare system. It's how the doctors listened to the patients and the decisions that they made. And by incorporating that personal element, by incorporating a little bit of instinct, and by listening and empathy, that doctor was able to arrive at a much better outcome for that patient. And so I think that's an isolated example, and it's an extreme example, but it is an example of the ways that the kinds of skills and qualities that are fostered in the arts, empathy, narrative, can inform the human experience and can inform the sciences. Okay.
So do you think that in our universities, for example, I remember when I was in school, anytime we saw the theater art students singing, dancing, and playing all their instruments, we just look at them and then these people are just having fun. We still have that perception, even at the highest level. In your university, do they place much more premium on your theater art department vis-a-vis the medical school or the engineering? Or you made mention of the fact that the business administration is the largest.
Yes.
Do you share the cake equally? Do you look at the issues equally? Or we just kind of trivialize the theater art studies as something that must exist?
That's a great question. I think there are still some impulses in American higher education that tend to push the arts a little bit to one side. But I'm glad that there's a place for the arts. In most colleges and universities, certainly in liberal arts institutions, obviously there are specialized, a school of engineering or a medical school isn't going to necessarily have an arts program. But again, those students can benefit from these kinds of qualities. And I think particularly at the undergraduate level, there's great value to that. That those students, and of course the students who are majoring in those fields and are trying to go into those professions, have to work long hours at a very sophisticated level. Again, I think part of the reason we think of these people as creative, gifted geniuses is that we don't always see how much work goes into it. We assume that an actor who can make a performance look very natural just has that innate ability, and we don't think about the hours and weeks and months and years of practice and rehearsal and study of technique that allows that actor to make that performance look natural, even rehearsed for hundreds of days. It's true of visual, challenge you in the various African universities to also for the areas of the if even to deal with their fields. That's something, but I think you have very
who has been future. But if you are given the opportunity to think twice, will you still go in to be a professor in theater arts?
Yes, I would. I love it. I love what happens when I get into a room with other performing artists and I direct a play or I act in a play under somebody else's direction. It forces me to exercise a different part of myself. It stretches me in certain ways, but I find it very rewarding to be on stage in front of an audience and knowing that I'm contributing to a production that gives joy to people or that challenges people or that educates people, or for me as a director, again, to help create a performing arts event that touches people's lives, that changes them in some way, that perhaps makes them think about a topic in a way that they haven't before. I find that very rewarding, and no, I wouldn't change it. If I could go back and do it over, I would do it. I would do it again. I might start a bit earlier. Actually, I might have gone to my father in my first year of university and just said, "Dad, I think I'd like to be a theater major."
That's great. Now you're going to be in Ghana for some few days.
Yes,
with,
that's right.
Wisconsin International University College.
Yes.
Can you share with us what exactly you'll be doing with them, and then some other universities that you'll be working with in Ghana as well?
Certainly. I will be participating in a symposium later today on some of the same topics that we've discussed today, the value of the creative arts in education in Africa. I have been invited to give their commencement address at their commencement exercises this Saturday. So I'll be doing several things on the WIUC campus. Concordia Irvine has a memorandum of understanding with Wisconsin International University College. So we have partnered together on academic programs, and we're going to be talking about other ways that our two universities might collaborate or connect. I hope to connect with other higher education professionals in Ghana as well. We have some contacts at the University of Ghana. We've had student exchange with them in the past. And we'd like to continue to find ways that we could have faculty exchange, that we could have study tours back and forth, because I think, again, our two cultures have so much to learn from each other. There's great value, I think, in American students having cross-cultural experiences and experiencing what's happening in Africa. It's an exciting continent. Ghana's an exciting country. There's a lot of growth here. You have a long heritage and long history, but you have a relatively short tradition as an independent nation, and yet you've accomplished so much in that time. That's very exciting to see. And I think for our students to see what's happening here and to learn from what's going on, to compare and contrast what they've learned in the United States with what's happening here would be of great value. And I would like to think that we in the United States might have something to offer to students and faculty from Ghana as well.
That's great. Thank you so much. And remember the greetings we did? We go this way again?
Yes, we go this way.
You go this way?
Yes.
Great. So viewers, I have been chatting with Professor Lucas Senkbeil, and he is the Provost and Executive Vice President of Concordia University, Ivald, California in the United States. And he has been so fantastic. We've been looking at the relevance of the creative art industry in higher education. This is AAU Talks. Stay tuned and keep watching. Join us on our social media platforms. My name is Kwesi Sam.